Hey everybody, Josh Diekman with Land O'Lakes, and welcome to Knife Training and Knife Skills. Today we're going to be talking about the different types of knives that are most commonly used, learn the differences between them, what knife to use for what. We're going to talk a little bit about knife safety, and then we're going to get into some of the more common cuts you might see using some produce. You may have used some of these cuts in the past, but if not, there should be some good tidbits in there for you. So with that being said, let's get started. Okay, before we get started, let's talk about the knife itself. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of different types of knives out there for different jobs, but they all pretty much have the same parts to a knife, okay? Starting with the butt, you have the butt of the knife here. You have the bolster, which is right here. The bolster, they're not on all knives, but what they do is they help with the balance of the knife. They also make a nice seal in between the handle and the knife itself. Sometimes without one, you can see some nooks and crannies where water and debris can get in there. But mainly it's for balancing in your hand for a nice, safe, comfortable feel. This is the heel of the knife. The back part here is known as the spine. Of course, you have the edge of the knife right here. You have the tip, and then you have the point. And the point of the knife is usually the sharpest part. So you'll see a lot of chefs just using the point at times. That's because that is a very sharpest part of the knife. And almost most importantly, you have what's called the tang. And you can see there's a metal goes all the way through here. The steel of the knife goes all the way through. Now what that's telling me is that from all the way from the tip all the way through the handle is going to be one piece of metal, okay? Okay, let's talk about some of the different types of knives you're going to find out there. These are the most common, they're not every one, but you have these first three here are chef's knives. These are going to be your workhorses. About 75 to 80% of your jobs are going to be using a chef knife. This version, I have a 10-inch, an 8-inch, and a 6-inch, with the 8-inch being the most common. All of them will work, it just really depends on your comfort level and holding the knife. Then we have a boning knife. This works really well for if I'm like fabricating chickens or want to get into a place where I can get the blade in and have a lot of dexterity with what I'm doing, so cutting between joints and things like that. Definitely that boning knife is where to go. There's a paring knife here. Paring knives work great for doing small jobs, berries and things like that, cherry tomatoes and that kind of stuff, different types of fruit. So this is really good. If I did it with another knife, the chances of hurting myself are greater, so this comes down to using the right job for the right knife for the right job. So a paring knife works really well for the small intricate work. Then we have a bread knife here. You can see the charades. These all come in different sizes, of course, so whatever's comfortable for you. But the sharp charades on this make it ideal for cutting through crusts of breads without crushing the bread. I also like to use this for pineapples and things like that with tough skins. The charades really help get in there really nicely. This is a slicing knife. I use this as my brisket knife. It's nice and flat, so I can get a nice even cut all the way through, as opposed if I use something like this with the curve on there. It also doesn't have a sharp tip on there, so as I'm slicing and coming through, that tip is not going to pierce through any of the meat unintentionally. And then you have a Sotuka style here, and the difference between these is that you see these notches cut into them, and those are to provide air bubbles in between your food and your knife to help release it a little bit. So if you're cutting like a cucumber, for example, that can really stick to your knife sometimes, sometimes having these pockets in your knife can alleviate some of that stick and make it a faster process. So these are the most common knives you're going to find. However, if I was building a knife kit, you definitely don't need all of them. If you're looking at just kind of starting out, my recommendations would be simply an 8-inch chef knife or whatever size works for you, a boning knife depending on the type of project you're doing, a paring knife, and I think a bread knife. If I was only going to have 4 knives, these would be my 4 knives. So those are the different types of knives. Okay, speaking of keeping your knife safe and sharp, that's one of the biggest questions I get usually all the time is, how do I sharpen my knives at home? And you may have heard that a sharp knife is a safe knife. And that's absolutely true. A dull knife takes a lot more pressure to get through what you're cutting, and it makes a lot more force and gives you more opportunities to come down too hard, and it can be very dangerous to use that. A sharp knife cuts like butter, and it's very, very simple to do. So keeping your knife sharp is definitely going to be the first safety thing we're going to be talking about knives. When you hold a knife, it's important to hold the knife like with your index finger here and your thumb here. and then we'll just wrap your fingers around and you have a nice grip like this. Okay, that's really what you're looking for when it comes to holding a knife. If you're not holding your knife this way, I implore you, please try it. It might take a little while to get used to, but once you're used to it, it's going to be much more easier for you. Sometimes you see people cutting it with like this, okay, or like this. And what happens is you don't have the control. You don't have the good grip, the control. Your knife can easily slip out. And you pair that with a dull knife, you're just asking for trouble. This is going to be your #1 way to hold a chef's knife, or any knife for that matter, and it's going to give you a lot more control and dexterity with your knives. Since we're on knife safety, just a couple quick tips. You don't want to leave a knife in a sink, especially when it's filled with water, because a lot of times people will go in and they're just going to dig right into the sink, right, and feel around, and they're going to end up cutting themselves on the knife. Plus, it can damage your knife. So you want to make sure that you're not doing that. You want to clean it off right away after using it. Now you don't want to throw any rags or any debris on top of your knife on your workstation, because what can happen is somebody that might need a rag or something like that, they come by, they grab for that rag, and then they end up grabbing their knife, right? So definitely keep it clean, keep it visible so everybody knows what's there. Just try to maintain eyes on your knife at all times. Also, when a knife falls, don't grab it. You know, sometimes we feel it's instinct to grab for something that's fallen off the counter. The knife, just jump back, let it fall. Nothing's worth it. So that's the, if your knife is falling on the ground, let it fall, move your feet, get out of the way. And I usually yell knife if I'm doing it. Or anytime I'm carrying a knife around anywhere, calling out knife is very common etiquette in professional kitchens. So if I'm walking around the kitchen, I know there's people around, I'm just knife, hot water, right? So that's a good way to do it as well. But again, sharp knife is a safe knife. So how do you keep your knife sharp, especially at home or in your work and however you're doing it? There's a couple different ways. One, you have something like this, right? Now this is called a steel. And this is actually not a knife sharpener. This is a honing steel. What happens is once you use your knife for a little while, it could even just be like after a couple jobs with it, your edge on this knife doesn't dull, but since it's so thin, it can bend, okay? So you have a nice sharp edge on your knife, but after just a couple chops on the cutting board, it just beats it down just a little bit and bends it down. So what we want to do, it's not dull, but it might seem dull. So what you want to do is you want to bring that edge back straight. You want to realign that edge. And that's really what this does here for you. So let me show you how to do that. The most effective way to hone your knife is to get a rag out on a counter, one that doesn't slip. I usually put a wet rag, or I have a mat, a sticking mat that doesn't move my cutting board. And it's a great rule of thumb to always have a wet rag or a mat under your cutting board when you're using it. A slip cutting board can be very dangerous, especially when you're working with really sharp knives. But the best way, rag down. I have my steel here. There's lots of different kinds. And I just put it straight down just like this. Grab my knife. And I just kind of try to find my edge, okay? And just come down, okay? I'll usually come down maybe 3 times, spin it, come down the other side 3 times. And I'll just do this a few times. You don't need to do it a lot because it doesn't take much for that small edge to come back. So what I'm doing is I am just realigning the edge of this knife. So again, it was bent and it's right there, good to use. So that's realigning your edge, okay? But sometimes your knife actually needs to be sharpened. The steel will not actually sharpen your knife. It's not going to get that edge any sharper, it's just going to align it. So how do you actually sharpen a knife? Now there's lots of different ways to do this, and there's a lot of hobbyists and enthusiasts and purists that like to do it a lot of different ways. The best way that I can suggest to keep your knife sharp is just to simply get something like this. Now, I like to use my whetstones once in a while, but this is really kind of my go-to. I sharpen my knives about every 2 months, somewhere in there, depending on use. But this is just really, really easy. I have just some settings right here. It says Asian on it, it says Euro-American, and it says polishing and serrated knives, okay? Asian, if you look at my Asian style knives here, these usually have a 16-degree angle, an edge on them about 16 degrees. A common chef knife from Europe or America will have a 22-degree edge on it. And that's only because here in the United States and the Kingdom, you do a lot of this. okay? In Asia, they cut a lot with slicing motions. So having that edge is different. So this one here has an Asian model on it. It has a Euro-American, and it has the polishing and serrated knives, okay? And these are just really simple to do. You just want to keep your knife very very level, and you just find what you're looking at there, grip it really nicely, and you want to just kind of go straight in with this a slight pressure. And you only need to go back and forth probably 4 to 6 times, depending on how dull your knife is. It doesn't take much, okay? From there, I can see that I already have some shavings coming off there. What I'll do is I'll wipe that off very carefully, and then I can come into my polishing style right there, and I can go in and I can just, what I'm doing is just kind of realigning that edge, okay? The nice thing about this as well is that if you don't have one of these, sometimes these polishing ones, they'll have it where that you can actually realign the edge with this. So if you want to keep your knife sharp at home, something like this is going to do the trick for you just fine. So I would highly recommend this. Okay, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's get cutting some produce. Okay, let's start with how I do my peppers. Now, I do my peppers maybe a little differently than you might have seen. There's a couple ways to do this. Just another tidbit, you might have seen these. Some have 3 lobes on here, and some have 4 lobes on here. There really is no big difference in there, but some people will say that the one with 3 has less seeds and is a little more bitter. So they like to use these for cooking, and if they're doing raw, they like to use the one with 4 because they say it's a little sweeter. Honestly, it's very hard to tell the difference, so don't worry about it. Just wanted to give you a little tidbit on there. But here's a really simple, if I'm going to be slicing or julienne or dicing the pepper, what I do is I just come in from the top as much as I can right here. And I just easily come out and I just cut an edge off just like that. Really nice and easy. And if I do it right, I can leave all my seeds intact. Just really nice and really, really easy. I have my seeds right here. I can just easily discard this and I'm on my way. And then from there, if I want to just cut, now when you cut your produce or anything for that matter, you want to use your knuckles. Okay, so knuckles out, fingers in, and then I'm going to use my thumb as kind of a guide. Okay, and when I bring my knife, I'm going to be following my knuckle, and that's how I know keep control of what I'm cutting. So just I got the claw method here, it's called. Got it right on my edge, and then I'm just going to go ahead and follow it, moving my hand and my fingers and using my thumb as I work through the product. And then if I want to just do a simple dice with this, I can just do the same thing like this. Really, really easy. Now another method to do the pepper, if you want to clean it up a little bit and make it a little more nicer, is just simply take it, cut the top off, I'll cut the bottom off, and I'll either dice these separate or keep them for another project, another use. And then I'm going to come in and with these connective tissues right here, I'm just going to go in and very carefully kind of cut these off. Very simple. I'll do it on the bottom here. I'll cut one side, again very carefully, and I'll kind of be able to open this up, okay? And if I got those tissues out right, I can just take my centerpiece out just like that. Very easy. Make this a little easier to work with. I'm going to take it down the middle here, and then I will continue my cuts from here. And as you can probably see, these are more uniform in size and shape, and depending on what you're making, these might be what you're looking for. And again, I can just kind of come through and do my dice like I would as well. So those are peppers. Okay, next I'm going to show you a tomato, a Roma tomato. Here's what I have. Now there's a couple of different things depending on what you're doing. In a service industry, depending on what you're doing, you might use the whole tomato and just cut it and dice it. But generally, when we're making picos and different things like that, we want to take the seeds out in the middle because it just keeps your product fresher. Now, if I'm doing chilies and stews and stuff, I'd leave the whole thing in there. But what's the best way to go ahead and take care of this? There's a couple different methods. One, I like cutting it in wedges. Okay, and then from here, I can just carefully kind of come in, and I'm going to come right along the inside here and just take the whole packet out just by itself. You can see, generally you can get pretty close. And there's my seed pouch there. Really simple, might just need a little cleaning there. And I have this great little tomato fillet, which then I can kind of come in and do what I want. And I don't have those seeds breaking apart in my dish. So again, really, really simple and easy to do, depending on your service style. But if you're doing this at home, you're gonna notice a much cleaner recipe than having that jelly seed pack in there. Another fun way to do this is to simply take this and cut on both edges just around your tomato. Okay, and then I'm going to take a spoon and just kind of come in and take that whole, try to take that whole pack out. And what's fun about this method is that you can then take this tomato and you can stuff something in here. You can do whatever you want to do. So I can, if I want to have some spinach dip or whatever I want, I can put it in this, bake them for a stuffed tomato, really kind of nice and easy. But again, I have my cleaned fillet, and then from there, I can come in and do my cuts. So if you haven't taken the seeds out of a tomato when you're cooking, it's something worth trying because it does make a much cleaner flavor in your food. But again, if I'm stewing or doing anything like that, you want to have that good tomato stuff in there. Okay, let's talk one of my favorite cuts and one of the simplest ones to do, the chiffonade. And I like this for a lot of different reasons. You can do this with any leafy vegetable or leafy herb. Here I have some basil. And what you do is you just take your basil leaves, I clean and wash these, pat dry them, and then you just stack the leaves together. So just one on top of the other. Generally I put the bigger ones down in the bottom, but it doesn't really matter. They're all in there nicely. So what I'm going to do is just roll this up. Now I have a rolled version of this, and then from there I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to cut these into strips. And what I love about this cut is I'm able to get a lot more flavor out of my basil because it's so spread out now. All those oils have come out and I'm able to get much more surface contact on my recipe, and all that flavor is just going to come out and be really, really good. Now the next method to do this way is the same method, is going to be the same method, except I'm going to be doing more of a slicing motion. So here I have my basil leaves all together, and I'm going to go ahead and roll them up the same way. Okay. Now, before, you might notice I did more of a classic cut, like when it was like this. Now, cutting this way, delicate herbs like this can bruise, but if I'm using it right away, I'm not going to worry about it. If I was prepping the day before or prepping another time, what I would do instead is, as I mentioned, the point of the tip is usually the sharpest. So what I would do here then is I'm just going to do the slicing motion as thin as I can. And when I'm slicing it like this, I'm not bruising it. I'm just simply slicing it with the tip of the knife. And I'm getting the same results, but I'll be able to hold this a lot longer than the other one I did, depending on what I'm using it for. Obviously it takes a little bit longer, so if you're using it right away, I just cut it up. But this gives it a really fluffy, really nice, really easy, and I can just smell that basil coming right out. This is what I'm going to be using for dinner tonight for sure. Okay, since we're talking about herbs, let's go ahead and continue with herbs. What I have here is just some cilantro, and there's a lot of different ways you can cut your cilantro and herbs and things like that. Here's one of the easiest ways I've done it, is when you're just going to go for a chop. You know, most people, what they do is they'll just put some on the counter, and then they'll kind of, and they'll just go through and they'll just cut it. Then they'll cut it again this way, then they'll cut it again this way, then they'll chop, 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 and eventually they're going to get to what they're looking for. We're going to do a little bit like that, but there's an easier way to do it. Basically, I just have my herbs. Any herb will work, and I kind of like the basil. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of just bunch this up. And you're just going to bunch it up. I'm going to kind of fold it a little bit, kind of get a little roll. So you can do this with any herb, okay? So basically I just kind of condense all this. And then my first cut here is going to be a lot more precise, and I'm going to be able to get a lot smaller from the very get-go. And then just do some fine cuts. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take it, I'm going to kind of do it again. Kind of bunch it up, give it a quarter turn. You're not going to get it perfect. And this has helped me, save me about bringing my knife through here. I would have to do it about 5 more times to get to this. So again, just bunching it up and go ahead and cutting it makes it really simple and easy to do. All right, let's talk garlic. I'm not ashamed to admit, I learned this from Rachael Ray. And then when I started telling people about it, they were like, oh yeah, duh, that's what we all been doing. I'm like, oh, well, I learned from Rachael Ray. But here's what we're gonna do. Just open up your garlic, okay? Got my garlic kind of there. And then I'm just gonna get to each kind of clove here. And then peeling this can be really kind of difficult. So what we want to do is we're just going to smash this. Really, really simple, okay? So very carefully, I'm going to use my knife right here, put it right on top, and I'm going to carefully, without coming any close to the edge, come down, and I'm just going to push down, okay? Push down, and what I just did was I crushed this, kind of cracked it open like a peanut, okay? So now it's going to peel very easily. And there's my garlic. And then from here, same method, knuckles and my thumb kind of guiding it. And if I want to get this a little more thinner, then I'll come through with my knife one more time and then just kind of get it a nice little cut. Be very careful as garlic can stick to your knife, but just really thin. And this works great in any dish you're going to do. Okay, onion. Now you may have seen this one before, but it's really, really super easy to cut through an onion. What I'm going to do is I peeled the outside because as you cut into something, your knife is going to take whatever is on the outside and it's going to bring it into the food that you eat. So for onions and stuff like that, I try to make sure that I peel the layers off of it. Watermelons and melons I like to wash as well because your knife's going to take through everything from the outside all the way to the middle as the knife passes through it. So I got a peeled onion here, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to simply cut it right down the middle, 2 halves. Okay. Now you're going to notice here that there is a stem here on this side. So I'm going to start with this side here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a little trim here. Really nicely. Now I'm going to do a dice on this onion. So the best and easiest way to do this, instead of just keep chopping, is that we're going to make some wedges in there. Now I'm keeping the stem intact, okay? So I'm not going all the way through, but my knife is kind of coming all the way up almost to the end. If you see that? Okay, so I'm coming in, and however size I want my dice is the size that I'm making it. So it's about a 1/4 inch there. And I'm just kind of coming in, making my cuts. Really simple. Now another thing, I can just go through it this way, but what I like to do is very carefully make a cut in the middle, all the way almost to the end again, but not all the way. Pull it out, and basically I'm making kind of like a weird blooming onion type of thing. And what you're going to notice is now when I make my cuts this way, we're already diced. Super convenient, very, very easy to do it, and it just saves a ton of time. We're using the natural layers in the onion to help do half the work for us. So really, really simple and easy to do there. And then I would just dice around the stem. Very, very simple. So again, saves you a ton of time. Okay, jalapenos. So basically, really simple. If you have gloves, you can do it this way, no problem. And I wear contacts, so I will not touch a jalapeno without gloves on. But basically, way I take the top off, okay? And then this is again if I'm dicing it. And then I'm just gonna go right down the middle here. Okay, real simple. Open it up. All my seeds and everything are intact. From there, I'll take it and I will just scrape this out with my finger. Now, you can cut in there if you want with a paring knife, but generally what I find, it's super easy just to take it with my thumb and just kind of dig it out. It comes out super easy. Again, I do not recommend doing this if you're not wearing gloves, but in my opinion, the very, very easiest way to do a jalapeno. I can make sure all my leaves, all my seeds, everything is good and prepped off the table. And then from there, I can slice my jalapenos very, very simply and easy. And if I had a chef knife, I could dice this. But so there's my jalapenos. Mango. Okay. What I'm going to do, this rolls, so I'm going to try to keep it safe. I'm going to take the bottom piece, and I'm just going to kind of cut through, make it flat. Okay. So anything like this, you want to make flat, that's the way to do it. That's going to be the safest way to do it. Okay. Now mangoes are awesome, but they have a really weird pit in the middle, if you're not familiar, and it runs down the exact middle of this thing, okay? So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take it from the middle and just move over a little bit, and I'm gonna try to get as close to that pit while I'm cutting through here, okay? Start to see the pit right there, okay? Come on this side, remembering about how thick that pit is, not there, okay. Okay, there's that. And then if I want, I could take this and I can kind of carve a little bit around this pit for maximum yield. And then I can work with that. From here, just really simply, I'm going to take this, again, very carefully, and I'm going to cut crisscrosses in this. Being careful not to puncture the skin on the other side if I can. Again, only work with what you're comfortable with. Now I'm coming this way. Kind of like doing an avocado with the seed gone. Okay. And then from there, I'm just going to try to see if this works. Turn it inside out. And there is my mango. And I can make it really easy to snack on, really kind of fun and just simple. Just peels right off. Mango. All right, when you look up cuts online, bâtonnet always comes into it, and diced and matchsticks and julienne and all of that. I'm going to show you a bâtonnet and kind of show you from there. This is kind of a well-known culinary cut. Basically, I'm doing it on a carrot here. I'm going to take about 2.5, 3 inches here, with the thickness of the carrot. Again, this rolls really simply, so this would be unsafe to start cutting on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get a really thin edge off here. So, so what I'm going to do is very carefully cut through, and now I have, it won't roll, okay? From there, what I'm going to try to do is square this off, okay? So one piece, I'm going to turn it over. Okay. Now that my carrot is square, it does definitely not roll. I use these scraps for lots of different things, of course. Now it's here. Now, since this is not very thick, I'm going to probably just go right down the middle, but I'll try it. No, let me do this. I'm going to do a little smaller bâtonnet. So cut one plank, another plank, okay? And then from there, I will cut my bâtonnet. Now, these are a little smaller because of my carrot, but that's how you do that cut. Basically, the French fry cut. That's a bâtonnet. Now, if from the same thing, if I want to make these smaller, I'll just make this smaller. Got my smaller carrots there. And let's do what a typical batonnet would be, something like that. Okay, so now we have our batonets, and from here you can simply do a large dice, medium dice, and a small dice, if you will. So from here, making them even, very nice. Medium. And small, and sometimes called the Brunoise cut. And just depending on your recipe, what you want to do with it, but that's just a really easy way to do those cuts as well. All right, so thank you for joining us for knife training. We really do appreciate it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We love talking about this stuff. It's always a lot of fun. And again, we really appreciate your time.